What happens when the truth becomes your only enemy? That was the question echoing in Alyssa Morgan's mind the night everything changed. She remembered that morning clearly. Sunlight spilled through her sheer curtains like a gentle promise, coffee brewed in the kitchen, and her inbox blinked with the usual rhythm of Monday urgency. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. But by 3:17 p.m., everything she'd ever built, her career, her friendships, her reputation, was taken from her in a single, silent moment. They said she was lying. And worse than the accusation was the look in their eyes. Not anger. Not even confusion. Just certainty. Like they'd always suspected she wasn't who she claimed to be. As if every kind word, every late night spent helping them, every secret she'd kept in loyalty, meant nothing. They didn't ask her what happened. They didn't give her a chance to explain. They didn't even look her in the eye as they made the calls, signed the papers, and erased her name. She was 29 years old, a senior financial analyst at one of Chicago's leading equity firms. She had worked for 10 years to climb the corporate ladder without favors, shortcuts, or handouts. Her reviews were spotless. Her record, impeccable. Until it wasn't. Until someone slipped a forged document into her monthly audit folder. Until the numbers didn't add up. Until the blame landed exactly where someone wanted it to, on her. Alyssa had never felt fear like that before. Not when her mother walked out when she was 12. Not when she moved to the city alone at 17 with barely enough money for rent. Not even when she'd stood in boardrooms surrounded by people who underestimated her. That kind of fear you can brace yourself for. But this was a betrayal so complete, so calculated, it stripped her of breath. She remembered the conference room. Cold glass walls. Leather chairs. The pit in her stomach growing as one by one, her colleagues filed in, avoiding her gaze. At the head of the table sat Lena Whitmore, her manager, a woman she once called a mentor. "Alyssa," Lena had said, folding her hands with practiced authority, "we received a tip about some discrepancies in last month's numbers." Alyssa blinked, confused. What kind of discrepancies? No one answered. Instead, they slid a printed report across the table. Her initials were at the bottom. Her digital signature. But the data was wrong. Fabricated. Fraudulent. "I didn't sign this," she said, her voice small. "You emailed it yourself," someone whispered. "The IT guy. Evan." He didn't look up. "I didn't," she started to say, but then stopped. Because suddenly she could feel it, how hopeless it was. No one was listening. They had already decided. The evidence had been planted. The motive painted. She was ambitious. Quiet. Kept to herself. The perfect scapegoat. And the moment they looked at her like she was a stranger, like she was guilty, was the moment she knew. The truth didn't matter here. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't scream. She just looked around at the people she had once trusted and said the only thing that made sense. "You'll come back. You all will. And when you do, I won't be here." She walked out before they could escort her. She took the elevator alone. She didn't even take the box of things from her desk. Let them throw it away. Let them burn it all. The storm hit the city that night. Sheets of rain lashed against her window, and thunder rattled the walls of her tiny apartment. But she didn't flinch. She sat on the couch, still in her blazer and heels, her phone vibrating nonstop beside her. News traveled fast in the corporate world. Her name was being whispered like poison. She forged financial records. She manipulated the system. She played everyone. No one asked for her side. No one wanted it. Even the people closest to her, like Camilla, her best friend since college, and Aiden, the man she was almost starting to love, went quiet. No texts. No calls. Just silence. By midnight, Alyssa realized something brutal and beautiful at the same time. They had taken everything they thought made her powerful, her job, her name, her seat at the table. But they hadn't taken her truth. And they hadn't taken her fight. So she made a vow to uncover who set her up, to expose every lie, to rise without revenge, without noise, quietly, clearly, completely. She would not beg to be believed. She would become undeniable. But first, she had to disappear. Not physically, emotionally, digitally. She wiped her social media, locked her accounts, changed her number, took a leave from the city. She moved back to Evanston, where her late grandmother's cottage still sat, untouched, surrounded by pine trees and silence. The place she swore she'd never return to. But now, it was exactly what she needed. She needed to remember who she was before the noise, before the chaos, before her name became a headline. The truth didn't need defending, it needed proving. And Alyssa Morgan was ready to do just that. The stars over Evanston were brutal in their clarity. On her first night back, Alyssa stood barefoot in the garden, cold grass pressing against her skin. She stared up at the vast, indifferent sky and whispered, "I didn't lie." Not to them. Not to herself. And someday they'd know it. Because the thing about the truth is, it waits. It doesn't beg. It just is. And when it shows up, it makes the liars beg to be forgotten. Before Alyssa Morgan was accused, before the silence, before the shame, she was someone people admired. Or pretended to. She was born in a small town in Iowa, raised by her father, Michael Morgan, a retired Navy engineer with calloused hands and a code of ethics that shaped everything she became. Her mother, Elena, had left when Alyssa was 12. No goodbye, no explanation, just a half-packed suitcase and a note on the kitchen table that said, "This life wasn't meant for me." The first time Alyssa learned what betrayal felt like, it wasn't from a stranger. It was from blood. She remembered standing in the driveway with a sock in one hand and her science project in the other as her mother pulled away in a rusted blue Dodge. She remembered the hollow in her chest and the silence in her father's eyes as he watched the taillights disappear. Michael never talked about her again. And neither did Alyssa. From that day on, she stopped waiting to be chosen. Stopped waiting to be protected. She decided she would build a life so strong, so unshakable, no one would ever be able to leave her shattered again. She became quiet but observant, calm but calculating. While other girls passed notes in class, Alyssa was studying learning numbers, systems, behaviors. She had a knack for logic and a memory like steel. By 15, she was tutoring seniors. By 17, she'd earned enough scholarships to leave Iowa for Chicago and never look back. She attended Northwestern University, double majoring in finance and behavioral economics. Her professors called her intense but brilliant. She rarely socialized, except for Camilla. Camilla Blake was her roommate and polar opposite, loud, wild, full of stories and scandal. But somehow, they balanced each other. Where Alyssa was discipline, Camilla was desire. Alyssa studied. Camilla partied. Alyssa analyzed. Camilla improvised. And yet, for 4 years, they were inseparable. Camilla often joked that Alyssa was her safe place, the only person who didn't judge her mistakes or her messy heart. And Alyssa, though she rarely said it aloud, needed Camilla's chaos more than she realized. After graduation, Camilla went into PR, bouncing from job to job, while Alyssa was recruited by Whitmore Capital, one of Chicago's most respected financial firms. She started as an intern, then an assistant analyst, then full-time associate. By 25, she was managing 7-figure accounts. By 28, she was being whispered about as the next VP. That was when Aidan Walker entered her life. Aidan wasn't flashy, like most of the men in finance. He was soft-spoken, thoughtful, always 3 steps ahead in a conversation. They met during a cross-department project. He was a legal consultant contracted to review ethics compliance across the firm's top-tier portfolios. He was funny in a quiet, deliberate way. He noticed things most people didn't, like how she tapped her pen when she was frustrated or how she never ate lunch until everyone else had left the break room. They started meeting after hours. First to go over reports. Then for drinks. Then just to talk. He told her about his childhood in Boston, his mother who still left voicemail prayers on his phone, his fear of heights. She told him about her dad, her escape from Iowa, the cottage in Evanston she hadn't visited in years. She never told him about her mother. And he never asked. They weren't official. Alyssa didn't do official. But everyone around them knew. Camilla said, "Girl, if you don't marry him, I will." Alyssa would only smile. She wasn't ready to trust love. Not yet. But she was beginning to want to. At Whitmore Capital, reputation was everything. The floors gleamed like glass. The bathrooms smelled like citrus. People wore $2,000 watches and smiled with their teeth, not their eyes. Lena Whitmore, the CEO's daughter, was the kind of woman Alyssa had studied in textbooks. Strategic, charming, dangerous. She had risen fast, too fast, and wore power like perfume. Lena had taken an interest in Alyssa early on. At first, it seemed like mentorship. She invited her to private meetings, offered friendly advice, and subtly tested her loyalty. Alyssa, ever cautious, remained professional, polite, grateful, but never close. She didn't trust people who wore masks too perfectly. Then there was Jared Lane, the tech guy who always seemed to be listening even when he wasn't part of the conversation. And Vanessa Truitt, the cheerful HR rep who knew everyone's secrets but kept her own locked in a desk drawer. Over time, Alyssa realized that Whitmore wasn't just a workplace, it was a stage. And she had become too noticeable. Her clean record, her efficiency, her quiet rise. It had started to threaten people, especially Lena. There were signs, small, almost invisible things. A file missing, an offhand comment, a strange delay in email threads. She thought she was imagining it, until Camilla, over brunch one Sunday, said, "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you at work?" Alyssa blinked. "Why would you say that?" "I don't know. Just a weird vibe. Be careful." That was 2 weeks before everything fell apart. 2 weeks before Camilla stopped answering her calls. 2 weeks before her emails were hacked, her signature stolen, her digital trail manipulated. And when it happened, when the accusation came, Alyssa had no alibi. No one stood up for her. Not Lena. Not Jared. Not Vanessa. And worst of all, not Aiden. In the weeks that followed her downfall, Alyssa returned to Evanston, a place frozen in time. Her grandmother's cottage smelled like old books and lavender. The garden was overgrown. The windows creaked in the wind. But for the first time in years, Alyssa slept. She walked barefoot in the morning dew. She made tea from scratch. She journaled. She wrote down every detail she remembered from the betrayal, names, dates, behaviors, tones of voice. She began investigating. Not like a victim, like a strategist. She downloaded old emails, requested copies of signed documents, reviewed metadata. And what she found? Patterns. Inconsistencies. Digital fingerprints. She didn't have proof yet, but she had direction. And something else returned to her, clarity. Alyssa Morgan was never perfect. She was guarded, hard to read, stubborn, not always warm, but she was fair, honest, loyal to a fault. When her friend's brother needed a lawyer, she paid for the consult. When a junior associate made a mistake, she covered for them. When Camilla went through her third breakup in 6 months, Alyssa never rolled her eyes, just showed up with wine and quiet understanding. She had always done the right thing, even when no one was watching. And still, they turned on her. But now? Now she wasn't looking for their forgiveness. She was looking for their cracks. Because she knew one thing for certain. People who build walls of lies eventually forget where the bricks are buried. And when she found that first loose stone, she'd bring the whole thing down. Not with fire, with facts. The moment Alyssa realized she was being watched again, she was standing in line at the Evanston Farmers Market, holding a bag of peaches. It was subtle, a flicker in her peripheral vision. A man in a navy windbreaker pretending to study organic carrots while his eyes traced her every move. She didn't panic. Instead, she turned toward the vendor and asked for a receipt. She wanted a timestamp, because everything now was evidence. 2 months earlier, an internal audit at Whitmore Capital had flagged a transfer of funds that appeared to have Alyssa's credentials, her signature, her approval ID, her terminal login. $480,000 had been quietly rerouted from a corporate client's return portfolio to an overseas account under the shell name M, Harrow and Company. Alyssa's name was attached to every breadcrumb. The investigation was swift. Cold. Her access was revoked. Her ID badge disabled. Security escorted her out. Lena Whitmore had smiled when she handed over the envelope. "We'll be in touch if we need anything else." Not even a fake tone of sympathy. Aiden hadn't called. Camilla disappeared. Jared avoided eye contact. It was as if Alyssa had never existed. She tried to fight it, emailed compliance, called HR, pleaded her case. But each response was mechanical, pre-written, as though her fate had been decided before she even knew there was a battle. When she showed her father the email printouts, he had only said one thing. "Someone wants you silent." In the quiet of the Evanston cottage, Alyssa set up her own kind of war room. She printed every email she'd ever sent or received at Whitmore, sticky-noted connections, underlined timestamps. She traced patterns in Lena's communications, suspicious gaps in Jared's update reports, and moments Camilla seemed to know things she shouldn't have. She wasn't paranoid. She was preparing. Because when people lie, they always forget one thing. The truth has a rhythm. And she knew how to hear it. One rainy evening, just past midnight, someone knocked on her grandmother's door. She hadn't told anyone she was there. Not even her father. She crept to the side window, carefully pulling the curtain back just enough to see. A man stood there, soaked in rain. No umbrella. Dressed in black. Not Aiden. Not a stranger, either. Jared Lane. She didn't answer. The next day, she found a letter slipped beneath the door in handwriting she didn't recognize. It read, "You were right. They needed a scapegoat. But not all of us agreed." No signature. No return address. Just confirmation that she wasn't crazy. She scanned the letter for prints. Nothing usable. But the paper? A unique kind, linen blend, used exclusively for internal memos in the Whitmore legal department. Jared had come to warn her. But why? And why now? As the weeks passed, Alyssa's investigation grew deeper. She discovered that Harrow and Company had been linked to 2 other financial breaches in the past 5 years, both settled quietly, both with internal scapegoats, both handled by Lena Whitmore's private legal team. She started compiling a dossier: names, locations, corporate entities, communication trails. One night, after digging through online archives and encrypted sources, she found something that stopped her cold. A file Camilla had accidentally sent her 3 years ago. At the time, it seemed like nothing, just a pitch deck for a brand campaign. But now Alyssa saw it clearly. The branding? Fake. The address? Matched one of the overseas wire accounts. Camilla had known about Harrow, and never said a word. Alyssa found Camilla at a rooftop bar in Chicago. She wore red heels and a lie behind her eyes. "Wow. You look alive," Camilla said, sipping her martini. "Didn't think you'd show your face in the city again." Alyssa didn't smile. "You were in on it." Camilla's lashes fluttered. "In on what?" "You forwarded a dummy pitch deck with a company tied to Lena's offshore laundering. You worked in PR. You knew." Camilla leaned back in her chair, calm. Too calm. "Look, I didn't know what it was. Lena asked me to circulate it. It was just part of the job." "You stopped talking to me. You didn't even ask if I was okay." Camilla shrugged. "I didn't have a choice." Alyssa's voice was ice. "We always have a choice." Camilla's smile cracked. "I was offered a promotion. A deal. I thought you'd be fine. You always are." Alyssa stood up. "Not this time." 3 days after the confrontation, her phone rang. It was Aiden. She didn't answer the first time. Or the second. But the third time she picked up. He didn't say hello. He said, "They're coming for you again." She closed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I shouldn't be calling, but they think you know something. About Harrow. Lena is panicking." "Why now?" "Because the DOJ got an anonymous tip. Someone's reopening the case. Your name is back in the system." "Was it you?" Silence. Then, "No. But I want to help you now. You had your chance." And she hung up. But her hands were shaking. because she hadn't tipped off the Department of Justice. So who had? Suddenly, her inbox, once silent, was full. A cease and desist from Whitmore's lawyers. A security notice from her old cloud account. Someone was trying to access her archives. A voicemail from Vanessa. They're watching everyone now. Don't trust what you think you know. She installed new firewalls, changed her passwords, burned old files, transferred her notes to a secure encrypted drive hidden beneath a floorboard in the cottage. She began operating under a new email, a new alias, building a case to take to the press. But the danger was now real. Because secrets only stay secrets when no one speaks. And Alyssa? She was ready to speak. One morning, she received a package. No return label. Inside, a USB drive and a note. I owed you. Check folder 3. It was signed only with the letter J. She plugged it in on an offline laptop. Inside were hundreds of documents. Financial reports, email threads, transaction approvals, some clearly forged. And there it was, her signature. Her ID, used months before she ever touched the client portfolio. A digital clone had been set up. Alyssa hadn't just been blamed. She had been prepared for it, framed, by people who had done it before. And this time, she had the proof. She stared at the glowing screen for a long time, her reflection flickering in the darkened monitor. For months, she had felt like a ghost, a shadow of who she was. But now? Now she felt power return to her bones. She wasn't broken. She was a witness. And now a weapon. Alyssa didn't wait for anyone to give her permission anymore. She booked a one-way ticket to D.C. under the name Claire Jennings, an old college alias she'd used when ghostwriting papers. She wore a ball cap and sunglasses, her long brunette hair tucked under a hoodie. In her backpack, beneath layers of everyday items and carefully packed toiletries, was a flash drive wrapped in aluminum foil and sealed in a waterproof pouch. On it, everything. The ghost signatures. The falsified IP addresses. The wire trail from Whitmore Capital to M. Harrow and Company, and then to 3 other shell entities, all funneled into a discreet property development firm in Montenegro, registered in Lena Whitmore's father's name. It was no longer just a workplace scandal. When Alyssa arrived in D.C., she didn't go to the Department of Justice building. That would have triggered alarms too soon. Instead, she visited a contact her father once mentioned, Eleanor Rain, an ex-investigative journalist turned whistleblower advocate. They met in a quiet cafe in Georgetown. Eleanor had sharp eyes and a sharper sense of danger. "You understand what happens after you give me this, right?" Eleanor asked, eyeing the sealed pouch on the table. Alyssa nodded. "They said I was lying. They dragged my name. They erased me." She leaned forward. "But now, I get to write the truth." Eleanor moved fast. Within 72 hours, a full investigative article was live on The Atlantic's front page. The woman they tried to erase, a financial empire's web of deceit. Alyssa didn't sleep that night. Neither did anyone at Whitmore Capital. The article contained screenshots of her being escorted out, email metadata showing manipulated timestamps, interviews from 2 anonymous employees, one of whom was confirmed to be Jared. The story exploded across social media. #Justice for Alyssa trended within hours. News anchors debated the ethics of corporate scapegoating. Reddit threads dissected her case line by line. Women across the world shared their own versions of betrayal, of being silenced. And for the first time in months, Alyssa's phone rang with something other than silence. Lena Whitmore issued a cold, carefully worded statement the following day. Whitmore Capital maintains the highest standards of integrity and is fully cooperating with investigators. Ms. Callahan's claims are unfounded and will be addressed in due legal process. But it was already too late. The DOJ issued a subpoena. An emergency board meeting was leaked, where Lena, red-faced and seething, screamed at her team. Camilla was nowhere to be found. Aiden, on the other hand, issued a cryptic tweet. "Sometimes the truth burns. Sometimes it cleanses. I stand with Alyssa." A half apology. But Alyssa didn't need his redemption anymore. She was her own fire now. 2 weeks later, Alyssa was summoned to testify in a private hearing. And who else walked in as opposing counsel? Lena Whitmore herself. Dressed in a charcoal power suit, expression unreadable, she met Alyssa's eyes like nothing had ever happened. But Alyssa didn't flinch. The courtroom was silent as she stepped forward and placed the USB on the table. She looked directly at Lena. "You thought erasing me would keep your secret safe," Alyssa said calmly. "But shadows only grow when you turn off the light." Lena's jaw clenched. But she said nothing. Because she knew. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. In the days that followed, Alyssa returned to Evanston. Her grandmother's cottage now felt more like a sanctuary than a hideout. The garden had overgrown. She let it stay wild for a while. It felt symbolic. One afternoon, she received a letter, this time handwritten. From Jared. "I should have said something earlier. I let fear make me a coward. You didn't deserve what happened. Thank you for standing up when the rest of us didn't. Jay." She burned the letter. Forgiveness wasn't guaranteed. But closure? That was earned. Healing didn't look like she thought it would. It wasn't triumphant music or cheering crowds. It was mornings where she finally wanted to make coffee again. It was opening her laptop without fear someone was watching. It was walking down the street and smiling at strangers. She got a call from a publishing house a month later. They wanted her to write a book. A memoir. A survival story. At first, she declined. But then, something shifted. If she could make even one woman feel seen, heard, or believed, maybe that was worth revisiting the pain. She said yes. Just as things began to calm, she received an encrypted email. Subject line: "Red still runs beneath the gold." It came with a single attachment, a zip folder. Inside, evidence of another operation. Another shell firm. This one still active. And once again, names she recognized. This wasn't over. They had used her story to cover up a deeper one. But this time, she wouldn't wait for them to come to her. She'd go to them. As she sat under the autumn leaves, journal open in her lap, she wrote, "They said I was lying. They said I made it all up. But then they came back. Not with apologies, but with fear. Because they knew the truth had found its voice. And it spoke with my name." There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes no one is coming to save her. For Alyssa, that moment didn't arrive with flashing lights or a dramatic revelation. It came in the silence after they said she was lying. In the days when her phone stopped ringing. In the quiet betrayal of people she once called friends. But instead of collapsing, she listened. To her breath. To her instincts. To the truth that had never abandoned her. Because sometimes the only one who truly knows the story is the one who lived it. Alyssa asked herself that question more than once. When they tried to scrub her name from the company database. When people she mentored refused to look her in the eye. When headlines ran with partial truths and none of the heartache. What do you do when the world calls you a liar? You keep speaking. Even when your voice shakes. You document everything. Even when it hurts. You build your own table when they won't give you a seat. You become louder than the lie. To the woman sitting in her car, gripping the steering wheel, wondering if she should have just stayed quiet. To the woman who was told she was dramatic, unstable, bitter, emotional. To the woman who watched someone else take credit for her work and swallow the rage like medicine. To the woman who is still waiting for the apology that may never come. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are a threat to the system that hoped you'd disappear quietly. Let that be your power. Alyssa learned that truth has a cost. She paid for it in sleepless nights, shattered relationships, and trust that may never fully return. But she also gained something unshakable. Her voice. And when you finally reclaim your voice, the world starts to shift. People listen. Lies shake. Shadows retreat. Because once the truth has a name, it's no longer a whisper in the dark. It's a flame. And it spreads. The story may be over, but the question remains. What would you do if they called you a liar, then came back, terrified you'd speak? Would you hide? Would you beg for their validation? Or would you rise? Let this story be your permission slip to rise. You do not need everyone to believe you. You only need to believe yourself enough to keep going. Even if your voice trembles. Even if they all walk away. Even if they never say sorry. Because survival isn't the end. Rebirth is. To the people who doubted her, discarded her, laughed at her fear. You came back. Not because you believed her, but because you were scared she had proof. And she did. But even if she didn't, her story still mattered. Her pain still counted. Her voice still held weight. And your return didn't erase the wound. It only proved what she knew all along. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. She wrote it quietly. Alone. No audience. Just a pen and paper. They thought breaking me would protect them. They never expected that I'd rise stronger. That I'd become the storm they pretended never existed. But here I am. And I remember everything. Now it's your turn.
To speak. To write.
To call out the thing you were told to keep quiet. No matter how small or old or unfinished it feels. Someone is waiting for your truth to give them courage. And the moment you share it, you're no longer alone.